Hey guys, I'm here to tell you all about DITS, diction, imagery, tone, and structure. Let's go. First of all, what is this thing I'm calling DITS? These are the authorial choices. That's the term that IB uses over and over. That are really the building blocks of literature. All analysis must start with DITS. Or similar elements, and can then be evaluated and used to support an interpretation. So this is really the beginning of how literature creates meaning. Let me show you some more. See if you can draw this little diagram in your packet where you have room. DITS is really these. Diction is the D, imagery is the I, T is the tone, structure, and then there's sort of a hidden atmosphere extra at the end. These are the authorial choices. And we start here when we attack literature in any kind of analysis writing. Then we move from looking at these authorial choices to evaluating them by looking at their effects. So we ask the question, after we find interesting authorial choices, what are the effects on thought? What ideas are surfacing? What are the effects on feeling? What feelings are created for the audience? And then finally, we get to meaning. And we have to start here with these building blocks in order to get to any kind of meaning when it comes to literary analysis. Another way to look at this, here is a larger image of what I just showed you. We start with the authorial choices, we move to the effects, and then we end with meaning. The three things we're doing are analyzing. That's what we do when we take a look at examples of diction, imagery, tone, structure. And then when we look at their effects on the audience, we're evaluating. That's the next step. And then the third, finally, is to interpret, to say, well, this suggests that the meaning is. And those are the three skills that IB wants you to demonstrate in all of the work that you do in IBHL literature. Okay, so let's talk about the analysis part first. This is where we start. And what I want to show you in this video are really what these different things are. So let's start with diction. And then we'll evaluate, and then we'll interpret. So diction first is looking at a particular word choice and what they denote and connote, all right? Connote is implying a meaning, hinting at a meaning, something that is between the lines, that isn't obvious or stated outright. It's giving a hint, it's implicit. A word denotes something when it is defined exactly. This is explicit. It's a reference to something outright. And both are important when we're looking at diction. These are good questions to ask yourself when you're looking at diction. What are connotations of certain words? Are there any ordinary words used in extraordinary ways? Are any words repeated or similar types of words repeated, and for what effect? What type of words are they? Look for patterns. Patterns are huge. Here are some examples, and I want you to turn now, if you would, to pages 8 and 9 in your text, okay? Pages 8 and 9 are Medea's first speech. This is after the Parados, and it is when she first addresses the chorus of Corinthian women. One thing I noticed in this speech is that she uses words of insiders, outsiders, or people native to Corinth and foreign to Corinth. And so I found these words that show the outsiders: foreigner, deserted, refugee, and some words that show the more insiders, the native people, fellow countrymen, neighbors, family, friends. And she uses them in ways where she's talking about the women having fellow countrymen, neighbors, family, friends, and she does not. She's the foreigner who's deserted. She's the refugee because she is not from Corinth. Something else that I noticed is she uses words that show women as objects or things. She talks about women as most unfortunate creatures. So it doesn't sound like a human, when you talk about a creature, right? It sounds more like an object or a thing. And on page 9, she says that she was something he won, talking about Jason, in a foreign land. And so here she uses the word something instead of someone. So when we look at words at that level, we're really analyzing diction. And this can lead to some interesting evaluation and interpretation. How about imagery? Imagery, these are details that evoke one or more of the 5 senses. We've got sight, hearing, touch, smelling, and tasting. Sensory details in this speech come up on page 9 when she talks about how for women, for in other ways a woman is full of fear, defenseless, dreads the sight of cold steel. So the dreads the sight of cold steel evokes at least 2 different senses here, the sense of sight and the sense of touch with that word cold. We also have comparative imagery in this speech, and I wanted to talk, I like to talk about these 2 differently, sensory details and comparative imagery. They are both types of imagery, but they work a little bit differently. The sensory details, these are a little bit more explicit and literal, although I guess she is talking about how it is somewhat figurative in that it's sort of an example of how women are afraid. Yet it's a specific detail that's explicit literal, dreads the sight of cold steel. Comparative imagery is much more figurative, where we have something that's not literally happening, yet it still evokes these senses, either sight, seeing, touching, smelling, or taste. And so a couple examples of these on page 9 are when she talks about how the husband lives with us and lightly bears his yoke. A yoke is something that's used on beasts of burden, like oxen, to till land. It holds them together side by side. And so a husband doesn't literally wear a yoke, but it might certainly feel like that to be married. She also talks about a sea of woe. That's figurative because it isn't a literal sea, but instead it's a feeling of this sadness because it's as large as an ocean. So here are some good questions to ask when looking at imagery. What senses does the imagery appeal to and how? What feelings are created? Are there connections between the images? And what is the effect of the order in which the images are presented? Another good question, what comparative imagery is there in the text? What's being compared to what? And what are the effects of those comparisons? Look for things like metaphor, simile, analogy, and others. Tone is the attitude of the speaker or the narrator or the character. We are talking about drama, so we're looking specifically at the attitude of the character as we look at Medea. Is the character sorrowful, objective, matter-of-fact, contemplative, sarcastic, questioning, angry? The list goes on and on and on. Here are some good questions to ask when thinking about tone. Who is speaking to whom? What kind of person has the author created? What do you know about this speaker? In what context are they speaking? How do they address the person to which they're speaking? What's their attitude toward the subject matter? That is key. That is the definition of tone. And then start looking at some tone words and thinking which one fits. How about in the section that we are looking at on pages 8 and 9? I think her tone is calm and rational, especially in comparison to the outbursts off stage on pages 4, 5, and 6 when she's asking for lightning to break her head open. She starts the speech with, "I have come outside to you, lest you should be indignant with me," explaining to the Corinthian women, the chorus, why she's there and that she has a purpose, she has a motivation, and she wants them to understand why she feels the way she is. This is a calm and rational speaker. While at the same time, she's destitute, enraged with her husband, and somewhat hopeless. So all of these feelings are in the tone of this speech. Yet she is able, through logic, to explain why she feels this way. And so I do think overall, it's a calm and rational speech. Here are some of the feelings that she has right now, but she's, again, able to explain why she has these feelings in order to get the chorus on her side. Okay, how about structure? This is how the text is organized, including stanzas, paragraphs, lines, and sentences. For structure in Medea, look at how the text is broken up and what seems to be emphasized the most. Look for transitions between sections, look for how the sentences are structured, and how the lines are divided. What's the focus of attention is a good question. Are there any unusually formed sentences or lines, repetitions? Who is speaking the most? Are the characters speaking the same amount? And how does the structure mirror the content? In other words, how is what they are saying similar to how it is presented? That will become very important as we analyze literature this year. Take a look at the first episode with Creon, and this is on pages 10 and 11. Creon begins, he speaks for 6 lines. Then Medea responds 5 lines, Creon 10, and then Medea 24, Creon 8. Then they're back and forth with 1 line each 8 times. And then finally Medea has 8 lines and Creon has 9 lines on page 12. If you total them up, Creon has 41 lines and Medea has 45 lines. So even though Creon is the one who is there to command Medea to leave, to exile her, and he is the king, he has the most power, she still outnumbers him in speech by 4 lines. And so that is something interesting to note, and that is how, one way anyway, you can attack structure when analyzing Medea. Finally, atmosphere, the feeling of an environment as constructed by a writer's description and objects within that setting. Now, of course, we are on stage for the play, and so we have to remember that. But sometimes we hear references to the setting, the imagined setting anyway, that the Athenian audience is supposed to understand is what we are seeing. And so answering these questions will help you when analyzing atmosphere in Medea. Mood is a little bit different than atmosphere, and I just wanted to bring this up. This is the internal feeling the reader, or in this case the audience, gets when reading the text or watching the play performed, influenced by tone, atmosphere, and everything else. So this is really what we're doing when we are looking at the evaluation of these choices and then moving to interpretation. All right, let's look specifically at Medea. Well, she says in her speech on pages 8 and 9, "Women of Corinth, I have come outside to you." So we know we're in Corinth, and we're outside of her house. And she does reference this right in her speech. What is the importance of that? What's the importance of the fact that the women of Corinth have come to her house, have heard her off stage inside her house, crying and screaming to the gods, and now she has left her house to respond to them rationally? Those are some good questions to ask. We can also answer this one, when does the situation occur? This is right after the parados. This is the first time we see Medea on stage after her offstage ranting. Okay, I hope this helps you a little bit with DITS and that you will find some good examples of diction, imagery, tone, structure, and atmosphere as you analyze the play Medea.